Who will speak for the waste? Who will speak for the wasting of our opportunity? Who will speak for the fires? Who will speak for the fires in which we burn our legacy? Who will speak for the lives? Who will speak for the species that are soon to fade away? Who will speak for the child? Who will speak for the future of the child that has no say? We are the voice of hope.
Hello, this is Paul Connett. I've chosen this location so that I can actually prove that I am in Australia. Over here in this field back here, I think you can see quite a number of kangaroos. There's one jumping there, Graham. Do you see? Quite big ones. And I think they're looking at us. They're wondering what we're doing here. What we are doing here is to come and look at this site for the new resource recovery park, which is part of the Canberra's No Waste by 2010 project. We're into 2003 right now, but this is the site over here on the left, which Graham is going to be telling us about, is where they're going to have the facilities to handle the separated materials and create jobs and small businesses in the process.
What you're seeing is the area where the entrance to the estate is going to be, yep, and very close to the area where the new materials recovery facility is. Yes. And then as you swing around to the left, right, you will actually start to see piles of soil and areas that are excavated out for the roads. Oh, yes, yep. And then progressively what we will do is actually build the areas where the blocks for the various different services and buildings are going to go. In essence, we're looking at developing the estate in stages. So the whole idea for us is that we will put some roads in that will allow us to initially build the materials recovery facility, and then from there we basically have some areas where we're able to then allocate blocks. So rather than sort of do it by any particular size, we'll be able to identify and then separate blocks and sublease those out to suit particular purposes. Our focus is on trying to get away from landfilling anything. This site is where we plan to put all the businesses that can actually take those materials and turn them into something useful. Now the government is actually investing in the infrastructure. We own the land. We'll be putting all of the infrastructure necessary and then going out and attracting businesses to come in and set up. So it's a very large size, and the beauty is that it's right next door to a landfill, which is another 100 hectares. So there is lots of opportunities for us to use the land to be able to do different sorts of processing. Like composting, for example. Like composting, or taking demolition materials and crushing them up. Things that need actually a reasonable area of land to be able to do that. We certainly have a whole lot of recycling opportunities and operations on the landfill. Things like Revolve, our garden waste, drop-offs for metals and other bits and pieces. I guess what will happen is that some of those may relocate here. Other ones we may end up having alternative businesses that are also in there competing in that same market. So the idea is that what they take in, they turn into some sort of product, and hopefully then we can attract value adding. So for example, the materials recovery facility will put out a whole lot of plastics that we could bale up and export, but what we'd like to do is attract a business that could wash, pellet and granulise that, and then potentially something that can actually produce new products out of the materials that we've recycled. And so the logic here is to have a single facility where all of those businesses are co-located, so that what comes out of one can be the inputs to something else. Now the other thing I think we'd really want to have here is a major education facility which will enable us to bring people through here on tours, to do market development, to do business development, and to really assist in terms of pulling this together as a great example of what others can do. What we want is to create the maximum resource value and generate as many jobs and investments locally as we can possibly achieve.
Well, Graham, you're standing in front of this facility called Aussie Junk.
Aussie Junk, that's
Tell
right,
us
Paul.
about Aussie Junk.
Well, Aussie Junk is one of the reuse businesses in Canberra. We also have Revolve. There are 3 sites where the community is encouraged to take unwanted reusable items and drop them off, and that these businesses take those materials, put them out for display and then sell those materials, and the revenue that they generate helps to employ the people that do it. So the logic in here is that we try and get the maximum amount of material being dropped off directly. They also do salvage from the landfills and from the transfer stations, where they recover items that potentially could be reusable, bring them back, put them out for display, and on the weekends we can get up to hundreds of people coming through these facilities. Revolve on their own have a turnover of about $1.2 million a year and something like 25 people on the payroll, and all of those jobs are being funded from the sale of the reusable items. I guess what Revolve will do is to look at the opportunities to take all sorts of materials, try and sell as many of those back on as they can, and over time focus more on value adding, like repairing, restoring, and being able to get a more valued product from what they're able to sort of on-sell.
And so if this Revolve wasn't here, a lot of the stuff would be wasted?
It would, and it'd end up just unnecessarily going into landfill.
And instead we've got goods going back into people's homes,
yes,
and we're getting good jobs too.
That's right, and we've got 20 plus jobs that have been created out of this, with potential to take it a lot further. And the sorts of things that Revolve is interested in is how do they actually get workshop specialists that could deal with everything from lawn mowers to electrical equipment to you name it, almost anything, and then they're able to sort of value add by selling things that are restored or repaired rather than just selling things as they get them. This is actually the drop-off area at the front of the Mugger Lane landfill, where we have a number of areas where people can actually take various different materials to drop off. That includes motor oils, where there is actually a whole drop-off facility and a dewatering tank, and then a large storage area. We actually have 6 20,000 litre tanks where we can store waste oil in, and that whole site is bunded to sort of keep it clear and protected. We then have a large paper cage where people can drop off, and this includes any commercials, all of the paper, cardboard that they have lying around. There is also an area where people can drop off any bottles, cans and plastics, and they're accepted in a number of hoppers in a mixed form. We also take things like car batteries and gas cylinders and halon containers, all of those sorts of materials. As much as anything, it's just really about, as people drive in, there are opportunities to drop off the various different bits and pieces that we've got actual markets for.
And that's in addition to the curbside recycling program?
That's right. This is really for those people who are bringing mixed loads to the landfill to drop off as much material as possible before they get charged. And the logic is that the more that they unload, the less that they've got on there, for the less that they'll actually have to pay.
Then they can drop off their reusable items.
Any reusable items at all, correct? Yes.
Drive down the side with the awning.
Yes, where there's an undercover area to unload. And if they've finished at that point, then they can leave the site. It's only then, if they've got waste left, that they come into the transfer station. So the whole thing is focused around keeping all of those alternatives at the front free and getting people to use them to the greatest extent possible.
So they're not charged anything until they drive to through the transfer station?
Only at the transfer station are they charged.
And then in addition to that, Revolve is allowed to operate here on a flat tipping floor.
Correct.
To pull out more stuff.
Yes,
that they can take.
And it's undercover and it's safe because it's basically away from people where they're unloading, and the whole thing is structured about trying to recover the maximum amount possible.
And when people come to use this facility, they can see kangaroos, beautiful birds and marvellous scenery.
Yes, and a bit of waste and a lot of resources.
And a few jobs.
And absolutely, that's the other key part of it.
Well, Graham, what have we got here?
Paul, this is one of our recycled building material operators. Basically, it's a commercial retail area where they sell the second-hand building materials that either they have sourced themselves from demolition sites or that they have purchased off other people who do that. In essence, what they're doing is taking all sorts of construction materials, from windows to light fittings to electrical to plumbing, you name it, timber, the whole lot, and then selling it off here at significantly reduced prices.
And a lot of deconstruction involved in this.
Yes, there is, and that's really the best way to get materials in a good form. If you don't get them that way, then what you tend to find is that they get damaged, and therefore the potential for reuse of them is significantly reduced.
Okay, and is there any notion perhaps that the lumber that comes out of demolished building could be made into furniture, things like that?
That is already happening, and we actually have special merchants who take some of that lumber and clean it up to sell it as really high quality timbers. Construction and demolition waste is our biggest waste in Canberra, and what we have is a system whereby before approvals to demolish are given, they must come up with a plan about what they're going to do with the materials. Now, we actually have about 4 different operators who take this material, but this happens to be the largest scale of all of them. What happens here is that after they've deconstructed houses or offices that are being knocked down, they actually bring here the different materials, which can either be masonry products or even things like, you know, road scalpings and the like, and they then put them through and crush them and screen them to produce a whole variety of different sized materials. If you have a look from over here, are piles of crushed concrete that then scan around, and you will actually see crushings of different types of bitumen, from coarse material to fine material. Go further around and you'll actually see piles of sifted soils, again more bitumen, various different types of soils. There are piles of bricks at the back waiting to be crushed.
How many tonnes a year do they handle, Graham?
They're probably taking around 140,000 tonnes a year in, and therefore they're working on a stockpile of material that is waiting to be processed. But one of the issues is about growing the market so that they can produce and supply to the market and be able to grow that in line with the supply. The large composting operation is primarily just for garden waste, but Canberra was designed as a garden city, and we generate probably about 140,000 tonnes of garden waste a year. They've actually got around about 18 hectares of land here, and process something in the order of 60,000 tonnes of garden waste a year that comes through this site. Every day they put down a complete new windrow from the material delivered that day. They have a process of actually managing each one of the windrows, and they can custom design what goes in there to make specific products, and blend extra materials in, including manures and sawdust and whatever else is necessary to get the right sort of CN balances and to produce the sorts of final products that they're looking for. So the material goes into the windrows. They then have a scat windrow turner that, you know, when the temperatures start to drop, they actually keep turning those windrows over. It takes around 12 weeks from the start of the process to coming up with final product, which then goes through a screening process and ends up in around about 30 different products that they actually make. Everything from compost to mulches to potting mixes and the like. Well, Paul, this is our domestic collection system. It involves a 240 litre recycling bin that currently has a divider in it so that we actually keep the bottles and cans separate from the paper and cardboard, although the intention is that in the very near future we're going to have a contract change and take the divider out so that we mix all of that material together. So that's the recycling stream. and in the residual waste we actually use a 140 litre bin. Our experience is that most people are only filling it to roughly about 2/3 maximum, and the reason for that is that we actually keep garden waste out of our domestic collection. We do not allow people to put their prunings into this stream of material.
And that is collected separately?
No, we leave that up to the individuals to deal with, but we have sites where they can drop that material off free, or we encourage them to home compost.
How many people are composting in their backyards in Canberra?
Around about 60% of houses that have yards are actually composting at home. The one issue though that I'd say there is that a number of them are probably not doing it as well as we would like, so that there's an ongoing role to educate people to do it better.
And what kind of things do you do to educate the people on this?
We actually run composting workshops, half-day ones, where people can come along for free to learn. We've got brochures, you know, information packs, and there are people who will go around to educate people where they're unable to come to these courses.
What is this system that you've got in your hand there?
Well, Paul, what we have is a system of bin tops for us to be able to separately collect materials from public events where we get lots of people together, and in essence what they do is that they stack up when you're not using them and clip together to form banks, so that we're able to collect material of different types just by using any type of bin that sits underneath.
Like a 55-gallon drum or something?
That's right, yeah.
Just tell me about this thing here. What is this?
This is a collapsible chair that's basically just made out of cardboard. Yeah. Visi Recycling produced these. This is just one style of them. Yeah. And they made these for the Olympics that were held in Sydney. And the logic was that rather than producing a whole lot of long life products, they felt that they could make simple and sufficiently strong sort of items, and they did chairs and tables and things like that, that at the end of the event they could then just turn around and recycle them all. And believe it or not, it's actually strong enough that you can sit on, and it's reasonably comfortable.
Graham, tell us about this education centre.
Well, Paul, what we have here is actually a temporary education centre. Ultimately, we want to get a much better permanent site. So what we've done is actually taken an old building and transported it onto the side of our landfill, and then been able to use as many sort of second-hand or reused materials as possible to try and promote the theme. So the whole centre itself has actually all been painted with second-hand paint. We've got second-hand carpets inside, we've got second-hand pavers out here. We actually even have a whole composting area so that we're able to run workshops and demonstrations, and then we actually promote the theme so that we get a whole lot of schools that come through. We're bringing in a whole Waste-Wise Schools program, which is designed really to be able to train the teachers, the kids, and get them not only to understand the issues and to learn about it, but to improve the practices within the school itself.
So what kind of things do they learn at school then?
Well, what they learn is the importance of using resources wisely. The fact that we are doing things that are unsustainable, that we really have an opportunity to make an impact through our own personal choice, and that we need everybody to make a commitment to do their bit, or else we're not going to achieve our no waste or zero waste goals. So it's more about promoting those messages, and then on the other side having the services and infrastructure so that they can readily get involved in doing it. So the recycling in your home, use your yellow lid bin, which is our normal sort of curbside recycling thing, or drop off at recycling centres and compost food scraps and garden waste. When you shop, recycle, close the loop by buying recycled products, and look for packaging that's made out of recycled materials. And if you're at work or at school, examples of what you can do: set up recycling collections or start a worm farm for food waste and scraps. So you can see this is just a few ideas, but what we try and do here is to bring out kids and actually then start to train them on what happens with waste and start to rethink those processes through.
Grandpa!
What?
Will I grow up to be big and strong like you?
I sure hope so, son.
Why wouldn't I, Grandpa?
Well, unless something is done soon, big old trees like me will be nothing but a memory, like the giants in the old fairy tales.
But Grandpa, what would the forest be without old ones like you?
I think they call it a tree farm, son.
Behind me I noticed some composting. Tell us about
Yes, what we have is in this area we actually bring or have probably every month or so composting and worm farming displays and demonstrations where we invite the public to come out and they actually get their hands dirty. And we train them in terms of ways and means of building even simple compost bins from things like old wooden pallets, the processes that are involved, how you do it, and we give them all of the hand guides that are necessary so they can go and do it at home.
And what's this?
This is actually a worm farm. And we have a local person who runs worm farms and he actually trains people on what's involved, and as you can see here, it's alive with worms. So this is part of encouraging people that they don't just have to compost if they want. There are other options that are available for them.
Of course that takes up much less space and the kind of thing that you could do if you didn't have a garden.
Well, that's right. Even if you had a courtyard or just a small balcony, you could quite easily accommodate one of these things for your food waste.
And I should imagine the kids, my hunch is that some kids will be thrilled with worm farming and others would run a mile in the opposite direction.
That's right.
So
but it's part of trying to get them to have that hands-on experience.
Okay, and tell me again, you say this paving is reused?
It's second-hand paving that have been picked up from a landscaping job and then it's been brought here and actually reused.
And you said something about the paint was reused.
That's right, it's actually second-hand paint. We have a paint recycler here who has been a paint manufacturer all of his life, and he knows how to blend and mix paint so that you get really good quality products, and that's what we've painted the entire building with.
Do you think we can go and visit that man?
We certainly can, yes. This is called the Mitchell Paint Centre, and the guy here is actually a paint manufacturer who has specialised in recycling old paint. What he does is accepts any old paint that people have, and he goes through a process of checking it, remixing it, blending it, recanning it, and then he sells it as a renewed paint, which he claims, and from experience I can attest to, performs as well as any new paint does. But it's sold at roughly half of the price of new paint, and it's a very good value-adding opportunity to get rid of all of those old tins of paint that people have around and get them back into paint rather than just letting it dry out and burying it in landfill.
You know a lot about paint.
All my life.
How many years have you been in the paint?
Well, I started as a painter at 14 years of age, and I painted for about 15 years and then went on to work on manufacturing. Of course, we had a local factory here in Queanbeyan, and I went to work there, and that's when I really learned something about paint, because you can be a painter all your life. Unless you go and see how it's made, you're never going to know really what's going on. But there, the whole thing has been recycled. The can itself, I better grab one of those and show you. Now this is the colourant that all paint manufacturers use to colour up their paint, is that. And all these cans, they shouldn't be, but there's a lot of waste, because if you fill these cans, you'll feel that there's probably that much colourant still left in the bottom. It shouldn't be there, but big companies don't have the control over their staff enough to stop this waste. This is a shocking waste, because some of these things are $40 a litre for this. So if you've got that much left in the bottom, and the can itself is always brand new, because they probably use a couple of hundred of these a week. Most of the manufacturing places we'd have here in Australia, and sometimes a lot more. But all that used to go in the landfill.
And tell us again about that dab. That tells you what?
It tells you that the paint's got good adhesion. It's got good covering power. And also that it's drying properly, which is very important with oil-based enamels, because that's the thing you've got to be certain of, is that they do dry properly.
And show us your label now, the renewed paint. Sure. there it is. Yeah. There's your label.
Yeah, that's the label.
Okay.
And we've got the little no waste by the year 2010.
Now I see a rather exciting graph on the wall there. Could you move over there a little bit?
Yes, this one is a beauty. What this is actually showing is our progress on trying to reduce our waste and the amount of material that we're recovering. And as you can see, back around 1994 and 95, we only had 20 to 30% of all of our materials were being recycled. We've now managed to get down in the last year to 64%. So you can see there's been a major turnaround, and what we've in essence done is turned the thing right around so that the majority of material has now been recovered and recycled, and a lot less is going to landfill. But what we want to do is progressively keep that going down to the point where it's 100% blue and none of the landfill is needed at all.
Well, there we are. We've still got our kangaroos in the background. This has been an exciting journey for me. I've mentioned zero waste was started in Canberra in 1996 many times on the road, and it is exciting to actually come and see it firsthand and see the reality behind the dream. This is a dream coming true. This is a very, very different view of what to do with discarded materials. We do have a landfill here. They will probably use that for quite a time, but the use will go down and down and down as they switch from waste management to resource management. And once again, we're not just talking about material waste, we're talking recovering people, because they are creating jobs for people. This is Paul Connett in Canberra, Australia. Thank you for watching.